just leave it at that. I came here to tell you that your sister and TJ are separating.
They broke up?
Yes.
Let me guess, you think it's because of me?
Christina Corinthos Davis was sitting on the couch with her legs crossed in the Davis home's living room, which was being flooded with the warm and comforting light of the sun that was streaming in through the windows of the Davis home in the early afternoon. She was sitting in front of a laptop that was open, and on the coffee table was a notepad that was full with ideas that were only partially formed. Because Christina was preoccupied with the concepts that were rushing through her head and the all-consuming intensity of her thoughts, she was oblivious to the fact that her phone was buzzing in the vicinity. She appeared to be deeply engrossed in a concentrated flow of ideas, as evidenced by the fact that she was biting her lip and holding a pen in her palm. It turned out that the brainstorming session she had agreed to participate in was not nearly as productive as she had anticipated it would be. Judging every concept that she conceived of as being either uninspiring, unworkable, or simply not good enough by her standards. Why is it that this has to be such a challenge? While muttering something under her breath, Christina rolled over onto her back and retreated to the cushions of the couch from behind. A category of things that she feels a great deal of enthusiasm for. Christina's most recent work was not for a career, but rather for her own personal needs. The establishment known as Charlie's Pub served as a source of motivation for her to initiate a community outreach program that targeted young adults who were struggling with issues related to their identity, mental health, or addiction. All of these were difficulties that she encountered in her own life on a personal level. It was difficult for her to zero in on a single area of concentration for the program, despite the fact that she desired to contribute something back to the community and establish a place where people could feel understood. There was yet another ringing sound coming from her phone. It was her reaching out to her, and this time it was Molly. Christina let out a sigh as she reached for it. "What's going on, Molly? What exactly is going on?" Molly responded, "I'm just checking in," as she said. "Regarding the brainstorming, how are things doing overall?" Christina let out a groaning sound. "A terrible thing. However, despite the fact that I have a million options, none of them seem to be the appropriate response. I am hoping that this program will have a significant influence, but I am at a loss for how to get started." Molly suggested that you might be putting an excessive amount of pressure on yourself. "Well, it's possible that it is imperative that you take a moment to pause and reflect, isn't it? In situations where you do not excessively try to overthink anything, you may find that the best ideas simply occur to you." Despite the fact that Christina was aware that Molly was correct, she managed to roll her eyes. "It is not what I want to be talking about when I say that it is easier said than done. Had you discussed it with anyone else, I would have been interested in hearing about it." The question was posed by Molly. The question is, Mom, Alexis, or Sam? Perhaps they can assist you in coming up with new ideas. "This is something that I want to learn on my own, at least for the time being," Christina stated regarding the matter. "I gave it some thought," she disclosed. "I have no choice but to reveal it." An instantaneous halt was taken by Molly. "That being said, I want you to know that we are all here for you in the event that you do decide to change your mind. If you need assistance, please don't be scared to ask for it, all right?" Christina expressed her gratitude to Mole by saying, "Thank you," while a little smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "This is something that I will make sure to do." On top of it, a visit from a longtime companion. As soon as the call came to an end, Christina went back to her notebook and began putting down a wide variety of words and phrases in the hopes that anything would ignite something else. Since she had been so preoccupied with her own thoughts, she had failed to notice that the entrance door had opened. I was familiar with the manner in which it spoke. "Hey, Christina." When Christina lifted her head, she noticed that her buddy TJ Ashford was welcoming her with a warm smile as he stood in the doorway. It was TJ. "In this place, what are you doing?" Christina let out a jubilant gasp and inquired as to whether or not we were going to pay us a visit. Before saying, "I was in the neighborhood and wanted to stop by," TJ placed a tiny paper bag on the coffee table and remarked, "I was in the neighborhood." Then he places the bag on the ground. "We provided you with some snacks as a reward. When I thought about it, I thought you may consider taking a step back." Christina giggled the entire time. "You have the right idea," she said. "At this point, I have been staring at this notebook for a considerable amount of time, and I still have no idea what I am doing." TJ sat down next to her and looked over at the notes that were scattered across the bench. "I was wondering if you have continued to work on the distribution program." In response, Christina let out a sigh and slightly whispered, "Yeah." The statement that she made was, "I have a lot of ideas, but none of them are adequate. It is clear to you that I want this to have some significance, right?" TJ gave a prayerful nod. "It's possible that you're trying to accomplish too much all at once. Imagine that you began by concentrating on a single problem in particular, something to which you have a strong emotional connection." In her mind, Christina considered the concept, much like what? "Well, you've had a lot yourself," was the first thing that TG said to her daughter. In order to serve as a model, you could use your own personal experiences. Think of the things that were most helpful to you or the things that you wish you had when you were really struggling. Someone or something that motivates you. As soon as Christina heard TJ's remarks, her eyes lit up with excitement. Suddenly, she flipped to a page in her notebook that was blank and started writing in it as quickly as she could. "I couldn't agree with you more," she chirped, her voice brimming with fresh vitality. "In the process of figuring out who I am and working through my identity crisis, I had the mistaken belief that I was the only person going through it. Now, I was fortunate, but even though I had a family that was always there for me, there were times when I was at a loss for what to do." TJ, she regarded her as she looked up at her. What would happen if the program's true purpose was to provide a secure environment in which individuals could discuss their struggles in a secure environment? It would be a place where people who are located online could go to get assistance. A place where they could connect with other people who have been through what they are now going through. TJ gave a pleasant smile. "I have a concept, which is the least I can say about it. Furthermore, it is something that you are the only person who is truly capable of visualizing right now. It's something you've experienced directly, Christina. You are familiar with the situation." The possibilities were flying through Christina's mind as she cautiously nodded her head. "There is a possibility that we may organize support groups, workshops, and guest speakers. There is also the possibility of establishing a mentorship program in which individuals who have been through experiences that are comparable to those of others could assist others." A fresh idea came to her mind, and after a few moments of reflection, she came up with the following. "In terms of such professional resources, we might even consider forming partnerships with local counselors and therapists. This is more than just a support group. It has the potential to be a lifeline for those who take advantage of it." In accordance with the steps that follow. At the time that TG left, Christina's notebook was stuffed with a great deal of sketches and ideas. One could describe it as a rush of pride and exhilaration when it occurred. Since she received the impression that she was heading in the right direction, it had been several days. The next thing that she needed to do was present her concept to Sonny, who was the proprietor of Charlie's Pub. Despite the fact that Christina was aware that her father would be there for her, she was also aware that he would have questions. She would need to be ready to respond to these inquiries, which involved practical matters such as finance and logistics, and she would take them seriously. After some time had passed, Christina sat up with her laptop and composed a proposition before falling asleep. In addition, her PowerPoint presentation offered more information regarding the program's mission and the goals it seeks to achieve, as well as the actions she would take to put the program into action. While she was working, she experienced a sense of usefulness and the realization that she was engaged in a worthwhile endeavor, both of which she had not experienced for a considerable amount of time. This was not just about her. Rather, it was about making something that had the potential to make a significant difference in the lives of other people. Engagement with the family discussion. In the morning of the following day, Christina and her family to the pub in order to deliver her plan. Sonny, Alexis, and Sam listened intently to every word that she spoke as she outlined her plan. A slight gap followed by Sonny's subsequent statement came after she had completed her previous statement. While he was speaking to Christina, he said, "This is incredible," with a voice that was filled with pride. In light of this, it appears that you are open to the idea of pursuing this venture, and you have my complete backing in doing so. Alexis gave a soft nod and smiled with a gleam in her eyes as she offered her support. The speaker stated to Christina, "This is the kind of thing that you are meant to do," and she was rightfully so. It is not only profoundly striking but also introspective and sympathetic. It is impossible for me to express how proud I am of myself. Sam wore a grin on his face. To put it simply, Christina, you have come a very, very long way here. My confidence in your ability to succeed in this venture is high. The fact that her relatives had spoken so to her provided Christina with the necessary confidence. But now she got the feeling that she was ready for it, despite the fact that she was aware that there would be difficulties in the future. Providing a bright future ammunition for a prospect that is promising. Christina experienced a sense of success as she emerged from the pub on that particular occasion. There was a lot that she had achieved. Something solid, something with actual substance, had been developed as a result of her brainstorming session that took place a week ago. Christina experienced a sense of certainty that she was just where she was supposed to be for the very first time in a significantly longer period of time. And if she were to embark on this voyage, she couldn't wait to feel the excitement that it would offer her.
What they think matters to me. Everybody else can kick rocks.
What about present company?
In Windermere, the moonlight cast long shadows that spiraled around the walls, and the feeble light that seeped through the enormous but intimidating windows of the house left no place undisturbed. Every nook and cranny was illuminated by the moonlight. When she felt a shivering sensation from the ground up, it was the same day that Ava Jerome had stood near a roaring fire while holding a glass of wine. That was the moment when she felt the sensation. Despite the fact that the Cassadine house had always had a more haunted atmosphere than a homely one, tonight had been particularly oppressive. Seeing him from the corner of her eye, Ava screamed out, "Rick," expressing her irritation. In what amount of time does it take to locate a single ledger that has been misplaced? You might be planning to betray me, but I have to implore you to refrain from doing so. Betrayal is not something that I am able to deal with well. Before Rick Lansing entered the room, a few heartbeats had passed. He was holding a disc of a manila folder in his palm and had a sardonic grin on his lips. "Ava, feel free to relax. Are you seriously under the impression that I would make it very plain that I would rob you if I were going to go and do it. Despite the fact that one of them was stepping gently within an unstable and ticking relationship, Ava straightened her brow, giving the impression that she was still holding to a decades-old mistrust of Rick to this day. Due to the fact that she was aware of his helpfulness, she made sure to keep her cool whenever he was present. If such is the case, what exactly is the catch? Ava pressed the button. The folder was presented to her by Rick. Here, everything is in order. Once more, with regard to Valentine's finances, you were doing everything in your power to conceal them from the public view. However, I would want to bring to your attention, Ava, that when you make an attempt to poke a hornet's nest in such a manner, you are engaging in a game that could potentially result in your death. Ava smirked, her self-assurance not yet being challenged in any way. Risky games are something I am able to play. In light of everything that has been stated, Valentine or anyone else who believes they have the ability to threaten me should get ready for a significant surprise. During the time that Ava was going over the documents, there was an instant knock at the front door, which reverberated throughout the vast estate. While they were both immobilized, Rick and she both shuddered and looked at each other with scared expressions on their faces. Were you anticipating the presence of someone? A word of caution was used to phrase Rick's inquiry. Ava chuckled. Not unless Santa came to town, but her grin did not reach her eyes as she repeated the joke. No, unless Santa Claus comes earlier than expected. A personal accomplice who is not desired. As Ava approached the entrance, the sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor could be heard. Finally, she opened it, and as soon as she saw the man standing in front of her, the once impudent smile that she had been wearing began to fade. The tone of Ava's voice was filled with disdain as she addressed Victor Casadine. To whom or to what do I attribute my level of dissatisfaction? Soon after, a voice was heard, and it carried with it the air of Victor, a presence that entered the room before any official invitation was extended to him. Rick, who was observed loitering around the fireplace with a visible displacement of the civil world, caught his attention briefly because he was there. A tone of superiority was used by Victor as he addressed Ava, saying, "My dearest Ava, I've noticed some recent activity that caught my eye. My attention was drawn to something in that. Without a doubt, you have been quite occupied the entire time, right? Who are the members of the board?" As Ava tightened her grip on the folder, she posed the question. Victor's gaze focused on the folder that she was holding, and as he did so, he smiled in a slightly menacing manner. "Oh yes, I have no doubt that you are. Digging has been done by you at a location where you have no business being. In spite of the fact that I admire your doggedness, I am worried that you have come across something that is significantly more significant than you are aware of." Rick climbed taller, his typical swagger beginning to waver. "Regardless of whether or not this pertains to the Casadines' banking records, we do not intend to utilize these documents as evidence against them. Finding leverage was the only thing we were doing at the time." The tone of Victor's chuckle was one that was both frigid and menacing. "Utilize that to your advantage? Contrary to a Casadine, is that correct? That is either a very courageous or a very foolish approach to take." On a virtually hourly basis, the stress is growing more intense. Despite the fact that the threat was immediately apparent, Ava's eyes narrowed, and her resistance sprang to the surface. "To be terrified is not something that you make it simple for me to do, Victor. By coming here, you are wasting your time because of the dangers that are present." This caused Victor's smile to begin to falter as he leaned in closer. "There is not the slightest inkling of a threat at all, Ava. The following is a word of caution. You put your own life in danger by lighting things on fire. And if you are not careful, everything you have constructed will be destroyed. If you are not careful, you will put your own life in danger. The question is, are we all finished with the dramatics this time? A shot was fired in response by Ava. The person who was speaking remarked, "If you think that you can come here and give some ominous speech and expect me to back down, then you are mistaken." With a waddle that resembled a wounded duck, Rick communicated that he was sorry he had participated. "We could be doing that, and we ought to be doing it." An abrupt no from Ava, delivered in a harsh tone of voice. "This is not a resignation from me." Victor's eyes glowed with a terrifying intensity when they looked at you. "Take the necessary steps to modify yourself. You can't say that I didn't warn you, though." After saying so, he turned his back on the person and walked away in a bittersweet manner, leaving behind a spectral silence. A stunning revelation that has been made. Immediately following the door's closure, Rick exhaled a breath that he had been secretly suppressing for a brief period of time. "I'm so sorry, Ava. This is really awful. It is not easy for Victor to make threats that are not true." His departure was facilitated by Ava. She remarked, "There is no substance. It is all talk, all bark, and no bite. No matter what happens, we are now at a more difficult position. There is a possibility that those documents will expose the entire Casadine company." Despite his frown, Rick did not appear to be persuaded. "Certainly, you have no acquaintance with him at all. In the event that Victor possesses connections and resources, he has the potential to eliminate us before we even get off the ground." The buzzing of Ava's phone on the coffee table occurred just as she was going to respond to the question. She took it in her hands and began to read, her brow furrowing as she did so. "Exactly who or what is it?" Rick questioned her after observing the abrupt shift in her disposition. The strain in Ava's voice was noticeable. "It appears that someone has gained access to my personal accounts. Not a single one of them." The eyes of Rick widened even further. "What exactly is it? How?" The stern stance that Ava had been maintaining eventually broke down for the first time when she said, "I don't know. However, that may not be a coincidence. This was most likely done by Victor. A risky relationship between two people." Despite the fact that his thoughts were racing, Rick strolled around the room. The time for action is now. If Victor is already taking certain moves, then time is running out on us, and we need to move quickly in order to deal with the situation. Ava gave a small nod, her jaw immediately clenching. "It is then that we strike him where it hurts. Tonight is the day that the documents will be made public." The statement that Rick made was, "That mission is a mission that will not succeed. If we do decide to make this information public, Victor will not only come after us, but he will also cause harm to everyone that we care about." The ramifications of Rick's comments began to sink in, and Ava hesitated as a result. Although she did not have any fear of Victor, she did not want to put her daughter, Avery, in harm's way. This was a boundary that she would not cross. After giving in, Ava answered, "Fine. A reorganization is going to take place. If, on the other hand, Victor believes that he is able to frighten me, then he is going to be in for a rather unpleasant surprise." It's the one and only punch. When the two were trying to figure out what they should do next, there was a huge bang that reverberated throughout the foyer. After a thorough check, they discovered that the front door was broken and that there was a parcel lying on the ground. While she was bending down to collect it, Ava's heart was beating extremely fast. No return address was included, and it was packaged in plain brown paper with no embellishments. "What the hell am I looking at, to be honest?" Rick stutteringly spoke, his uneasiness gradually building up to a crescendo. Therefore, Ava waited for a few seconds to catch her breath before she took out a single item from the package. It was a photograph of Avery that had been taken at her school several hours ago. When Ava read the message that was attached to the email, her hands began to shake. It was said in the memo that consider this your final warning. In the event that you do not remove yourself from the Cassadines, there will be repercussions. The hue disappeared from Rick's face. Wow, Ava, this is a really serious matter. We are well aware that we are in a situation out of our league. Fear transformed into wrath for Ava, and she became furious. Her hands were clenched, and she was enraged. Victor believes that he can intimidate me into submission, but he should know that he is grossly underestimating my capabilities. Those that endanger my family are never allowed to get away with it. The truth of the matter was, however, that Ava was aware that this was merely the beginning of a much larger and more perilous fight, one that had the potential to cost her everything.